In this video, I'm going to show you how to align a grid to a map when you're using a backing image that already has a grid on it. I try not to do this, and most maps that you can buy on Drive-Thru RPG and places like that will have a non-gridded option, and so I try to use those, but sometimes you have one that has a grid on it and you want to use it anyway, and so that's what I'm going to try to walk you through. So I have a great map from Christopher West here. But it does have a grid on it. And the first thing to know is that the EpicTable grid by default is 50 by 50. So let's make this a little bit easier to see. We'll change the grid color to something that's going to stand out. So a gold grid. So that way we can see the difference between our grid and the built-in one. Let's actually make it a little thicker too. There. So extremely obnoxious, but you can at least tell the difference between the EpicTable grid and the grid that's on the map. So the main problem that we have here is that the grid size doesn't line up with theirs. So you can you can gradually change the grid size. You do have to tab out of it. I happen to know that his maps are 90. So once you do that, they line up perfectly. And then we can change the grid back to something that's less obnoxious, or even turn it off. And if you do, snap is still going to work because the grid's there, even though you can't see it. Now this one's easy because his grid starts in the upper left. But let's say that it didn't. In that case, you're in this interesting situation of having to bump the grid around. Let's actually show it so you can see it. And we'll turn it back to something that's easy to see. Yeah, so you can bump the grid around to try to line up. Mostly it's going to start at 0, 0 for you. And these days, most grids are going to be that, and everything will work out great. But if you do have to bump it around to line up a grid, you can. If all else fails, you can just turn it off. There's some extremely old school grids out there or old school maps where the grids have non-uniform size, and those you don't have a chance of lining it up. The other kind that you don't have a chance of lining up are ones where the grid starts over in each room. So rather than being consistent across the whole image, and in that case, your best bet is to try to chunk it up into multiple images so that you can set the grid for each one independently. But that's a longer video. For this one, I'm just going to call it good at bumping the grid around and changing the grid size. Let me know if you want an example of how to do the chunking up into chunking a map up into submaps and setting the grid independently. It's tedious and requires you to do the chunking up outside of EpicTable, but I'm happy to show you that.